What nonsense did you believe for way too long before you found out it was made up? I was always told if I swallowed my gum it would not digest and get stuck in my intestines forever. I was told that it took 7 years to come out the other end. Hahaha, oh man. Reminds me when I was about 14 or 15, I had some horrible gastrointestinal problems thanks IBS. And it was mostly vomiting not the other end, though the other did start happening later, and my one doc said it was because I had a blockage in my small intestine and to drink a bottle of that god awful lemon lime flavored laxative a couple times a week to get it removed. But when he first said I had a blockage, I looked at him, and as serious as I could be, I asked, I swallowed a lot of gum as a kid, does that mean it really does stick around for 7 years and that's what's causing this now? He just looked at me, then mom, then me, did a fish gasping for air face, then finally said that, unless I swallowed like 20 pounds of gum at once, I was fine lol. As a kid I used to love sticking my hand out of the car window and play with the wind. One day my older sister and I were headed down the highway to go visit our parents. I guess I was driving her bananas. She told me it was illegal to have your hand outside of a moving car. I believed that until I got out of high school. I'm a dope. Then one day about 3 years ago, I was driving my niece somewhere and she kept sticking her arm out of the window getting in the way of the side mirror. I spread the knowledge that day. I wonder if it'll take her as long as it took me to realize the truth. Rather than find out something is fake, I found out something is real. I found out recently that Joan of Arc was a real person. I always assumed she was a fictional character from a book or something. My mom was 45 when I finally proved to her that pirates were actually a real thing. I was 20 when I learned reindeer were real. Like shit, those flying magical antler deer, Rudolph. Santa isn't real so obviously they aren't either. My friend and I found several legit looking videos on YouTube years ago that showed evidence of mermaids being real. I spent an entire week passionately defending the existence of mermaids to my whole family and people I work with. You can't eat salty foods and sweet foods at the same time, or it will cause indigestion. This was a lie my mother's grandma told my mom to get her to stop drinking sweetened milk with dinner, and my mom passed it on to me for no reason at all. My family also believes in traditional Chinese medicine ideas, so I just figured it was one of those things and never questioned this one specifically. I didn't learn it was completely made up until my mom accidentally told me. I thought Africa was one big country until I was 12 or 13. To be fair, I can see how a kid from the US would think the individual countries are states/provinces. Mine was not realizing that Mexico had states until around that age. I just never thought about it. I find it interesting how many products we use that are named after states, provinces, regions, etc. from other countries without realizing it. Tabasco, champagne, sardines and stromboli come to mind. Okay. This is really embarrassing, but I was probably 12 years old when I realized men didn't have one less rib than women. My parents didn't go to church, but I always wanted to go with my neighbors, and I don't understand why the church would tell the creation story without clarifying that men and women have the same amount of ribs. That a raise/promotion was on its way and all I had to do was be patient along with thinking of more ways to help out some more. My supervisors led me to believe that the raise/promotion was coming for nearly 6 months, but towards the end of that time I got tired of waiting and decided to quit. There were many reasons as to why I left that job, but being underpaid and overworked was one of the main reasons I quit. It wasn't until 6 months after I left that job that a former co-worker told me that it was all made up and our supervisor was just trying to get everyone to do more work so it'd look as if he were a good leader/supervisor. It still pisses me off to this day, but at this point there's nothing I can do about it. My pet rabbit went to a new home at the farm. I was at university when I discovered it was a lie. When pet rabbits who already live on a farm get old, they move to the city and live in a hipster suburb where they spend their days sipping coffee. They call them hopsters in Rabbit Town. My parents told me that the little eye receptor, little glass bubble, on the living room TV was a tiny camera and that it would record me and my sister when they weren't home, and they would watch the tape to make sure we didn't lie to them about what we did. This was a throwaway line my mom said once to get my sister to confess to something they knew she did. She was 5 and I was 7, and I believed that shit until I was 18. I knew how televisions worked and I knew how remote controls worked, but for some reason I never put 2 and 2 together until I was getting ready to move out for college, and I asked my parents, "Hey, where did you get that old TV that had a camera in it? Can I have that for my dorm to make sure my roommate doesn't mess with my stuff?" I'm still feeling the residual embarrassment of that a decade and a half later. My parents actually used a similar tactic on me when I was younger. My dad would have a little jar of what he called truth strips. If my brother and I were into trouble, my dad would take these strips out and say, "I'm gonna put this on your tongue. If it turns purple, you're lying." That was usually enough to get us talking. About a year or 2 ago, I was doing the pH unit in chemistry when the teacher brought up the topic of pH strips, and she had some to show the class. When I saw them, I thought to myself, "Hey, those look familiar." After 2 minutes of intense thought, I realized that my dad had been using pH strips to get us to fess up. I went about 8 years without a clue, and every now and again I think about it and how much of a gullible moron I am. Don't use paper bags. Use plastic. Save a tree in the rainforest. My school taught that nonsense for Earth Day. Then I have learned of tree farms. Then we learned paper decomposes far faster. Then we learned plastic is far worse in every way. Bonsai cats. I found a website when I was in college that advertised cats put into glass jars and left there to grow into the shape of the jar, with a hole for waste and a hole for their mouths in the special jars. I was horrified and showed some friends who were also horrified. Months later a friend of mine was like, "Wow, you really got us with that website, sappy. Hahaha, I thought it was real." Oh, yeah, haha, of course it is not real, and I was enacting fun japery, said I. Hahaha, I'm an idiot. If you eat pumpkin seeds, a pumpkin will start growing in your stomach. Also watermelon. That I was adopted. The story went that they found me in a basket in the river. I knew that was BS because it matches the Moses story too much. I just assumed I had been kidnapped. Wasn't till I was about 10 that I realized it was all made up and I was actually my parents' biological kid. My older cousin told me that U-Haul trucks were always full of whatever the picture on the side of the truck was. This made sense to me. Coke trucks were full of Coke, Walmart trucks were full of Walmart stuff, so why wouldn't the truck with a submarine on the side be full of submarines? I was 8 or 9 when I asked my mom how they got dinosaurs into a truck if they were all extinct. I think she actually took my temperature after that question. Every extra time you press the button at the lights to cross the road, it resets a timer and you have to wait longer to cross. That rivers flow from north to south and not otherwise. Once a friend of mine was fooled by our history teacher. He asked the class which part in Egypt was called the Upper and the Lower Nile. My friend said the upper, northern, part is called the Upper Nile. It's obvious. Turns out the Upper Nile is more southern because the land and water is on a higher elevation. Up until 8th grade, I pronounced volleyball as volleyball. Yep. I, born 1982, believe that my Gamma Boy needs to rest after playing on it since it gets tired just like a person. Clever parenting, in hindsight. When I was a kid, my mom had this old car with a turn-knob dial for the radio. She told me it only got old as radio stations because it was so old. When they gave that car to my brother, he immediately ripped the radio out and put in a new sound system. I always assumed he just wanted the new radio stations. Then I was in college riding in a friend's old Beta car and we were listening to a top 40 type radio station, and I was like, holy shit, how is your car able to get modern radio stations? When I was a kid, our parents were desperate to get us to eat kidney beans, so they told us they were actually Santa Claus beans, because Santa Claus and his elves ate them at the North Pole. I forgot the story behind it and just believed they were nicknamed Santa Claus beans. Figured it out when I asked for Santa Claus beans in my burrito bowl at Chipotle. As a kid watching Shrek, Seeing Puss in Boots get in trouble for having catnip on him, I always just assumed cat owners had to go to some pet black market to get a hold of the shit. I didn't find out catnip was not an illegal substance until I was 23 years old. When I was young, 10ish, I used the word extraordinary in front of my aunt, and she corrected me saying that, because it is literally extraordinary, it is used to describe something that is extremely regular/average. We argued for 10 minutes before I finally caved because she was the adult. After all, I fucking used it like that for 3 months before someone pointed it out. Fuck you, Aunt Sally. You have a message from the weird man. Like and subscribe for nothing in return.